Welcome to the Eating at a Meeting podcast. I'm your host, Tracy Stuckrath, dietary needs expert, certified meetings manager, certified food protection manager. I have searched the globe to find people and businesses who are creating safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage experiences for their employees, guests, and communities. In each episode, you will find authentic conversations about how food and beverage impacts inclusion, sustainability, culture, community, health, and wellness. I know that sounds like a lot, but we're going to cover it all. Are you ready to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line? If so, let's go. Hey, everybody. Tracy Stuckrath with Thrive Meetings and Events and the host of the Eating at a Meeting podcast, which you're listening to now. I am back in, North Carolina, in my home studio. Last week we were off, but I am so excited to be back in the studio and with my friend Judith Winfrey from Love is Love Farm. She is a farmer, a partner, a serial entrepreneur, and overall a fabulous human being who has fused her passion for good food to save humans and the planet by empowering, nourishing, and enriching people and their communities. Hello, my friend.
Hello. Thank you.
How are you?
I'm really happy to be here.
I am so excited to be talking to you. And so I was doing a bunch of research on you because that's what I do on my guest. And I mean, we've known each other since Field of Greens Festival, which is
2008.
2008. But 2007? Maybe, somewhere around there when I was first getting into this whole food movement, which, and at that time, I'm like, you and Joe, your husband, were like on this pedestal and of these farmer. I mean, I really did. I'm like, you were the epitome of good food people. And like where everybody wanted to reach to. So, I'm so glad that we're friends because I was like, wow, who are these people and what are they doing and how can I get involved? And because your fingers were everywhere and I love that.
Well, now that piece is true. I have been accused on more than one occasion of being a local food busybody. I think I had an awakening at some point and I somewhat blame the amazing writer Janice Ray for leading me to this awakening. And I blame is not the right word. Maybe I credit her and I credit just eating good food with an awakening. But I also I don't know. I had a fire. I still have a fire to change community, to change the world, to advocate for the planet, to advocate for the humans and the other life forms on the planet. And I'm flattered and a little, I don't know exactly what the word is. I'm flattered and humbled that you would say that you put me on a pedestal or Joe on a pedestal. I mean, we're just humans. And at that time, we were like baby humans in the beginning of our career in farming. Like so much has happened since then. And I'm so glad that we're friends. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, and I was changing my food system because I had food allergies and I needed to figure it out. And I remember calling Bob Smiles and I said, hey, somebody told me about this Field of Greens Festival. I want to get involved. He's like, all right, come to this meeting. You're now on the board or the planning committee. And that just ingrained me into so much more of that Atlanta food system and the farmers and Lori and Will Moore and so much more. But before we jump into that whole Atlanta food system and farming, can you tell everybody a little bit about who you are and
Sure.
why you do what you do?
Sure. So my name is Judith Winfrey. I am, for the last 13, 14 years, my husband and I, Joe Reynolds, have owned and operated a certified farm. We're in a little bit of a transition right now, so it's a little confusing for me to tell about who I am because this year, we converted our farm to a worker-owned cooperative farm. So we are now Love is Love Cooperative Farm, and we've joined forces with 3 other amazing young farmers who also have a passion and a fire in their belly for healing the world and providing good food and having meaningful jobs, and creating more meaningful jobs. So it's an exciting time and it's a confusing time to talk about myself a little bit, because I'm in the middle of this transition. I'm still in the same career trajectory, still technically with the same organization, but the organization is growing and expanding, including the expansion from about 2 acres where we farmed for the last 11 years in DeKalb County in Metro Atlanta to the acquisition of 70 acres,
Wow.
a little bit east of the city, about 45 minutes east of the city, where we plan to grow on about 20 of those. So scaling up operations 10 times at least.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And so you became, in doing my research, I actually found out more about you and Joe than I ever knew. And which is sad that I didn't know it, but it's good that I do. Now we can have some other conversations off record. But, it's Judith and Joe, but you all met working in a restaurant, and, Joe was doing some food activism stuff. I love the story of your first date, which is told multiple times. And I think it's that first date actually is really kind of the epitome too of where we are now in our food world and community. So can you tell people where you went on your first date?
Sure. It's kind of a funny first date story, but it was beautiful for many reasons. It crossed a lot of threads, or it threaded a lot of things together that we were interested in. And those things are culture, food, community, the exchange of culture, and exploration. So Joe studied as an anthropologist in South Georgia, and had done a lot of traveling, and including exploring places in South Georgia. And he had friends who had joined the Hare Krishna temple in North Florida somewhere and had lived and worked there. So Joe knew about this thing that happens at the Hare Krishna temple every Sunday. There's a free meal called, I believe it's called prasadam. It's vegetarian, delicious, curried vegetarian food that the community, the temple and the Hare Krishna community cooks and prepares and serves to anyone who wants to come. And there's a little bit of a ceremony around the food, and there's, like there would be in any community of faith. There was a moment of thanks, and then we did some meditation, and we ate this delicious vegetarian food, and it was right off of Ponce de Leon Avenue in the middle of a city that I had lived in my whole life, and I had no idea. I had no idea there was a Hare Krishna temple. I had no idea they served vegetarian food. It was just such an interesting, another sort of like awakening and exploration in a place that I had known my whole life. And it was, I think it speaks a lot to our sense of adventure, mm-hmm. and our willingness to build bridges where we can and how we can. And it was, it was a very memorable first date for sure.
That's awesome. So, and I think that is kind of the epitome of what you're doing now, with the community and what I've known you to be doing. Because you've had, as I said, you've had your fingers or your toes in the dirt for a long time, with Wholesome Wave and with Small Bites Adventure Club and Georgia Organics. And it's just all about bringing community around the food and local farmers.
Yes. Well, and empowering community. What I want to say, what you said about Field of Greens and how you got invited to a meeting and then you found yourself in the leadership, I believe is just such an important part of affecting real change in the world and making space for everyone to lead, and helping everyone realize, like, you are a leader, whether you see yourself that way or thought that was what you were going to do. You found yourself in a position of leadership and throwing an incredible event that affected thousands of people in the restaurant community and the community of Walnut Grove, where the farm was, to the city of Atlanta, where people drove in. And I think it's a story I wanted to lift up, because it's also a little bit of how I've built my career and lived my life, seeing where change needed to happen, seeing where leadership needed to take hold, and empowering myself sometimes to be that person to step up and say, okay, let's do this. Let's bring Carlo Petrini to Atlanta. That's crazy. And then also empowering other people to do it. Like, to me, that is one of the most thrilling things when I sort of look back at organizations I've had a hand in starting and things that I've participated in, always with groups of people, never alone, things I've participated in standing up. It's so beautiful and thrilling to see it continue. In the hands and the leadership of others and thriving. It's a really cool thing. I have no idea if I have answered the question you actually asked me, but I got carried away with that tidbit on Field of Greens, and I just wanted to say that.
Well, and I'm going to take a little bit of a tangent of that, and thinking about Andy, who owned that farm, and has since, he's watching us from above.
Space is the place. Space is the place.
Yep. And he was a farmer who was a paraplegic, right? And it just reading up on you too, your grandfather was a farmer, sharecropper with one arm, who then lost both of his legs.
Yes.
And I think that's kind of a surreal circle of life as well.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've never actually put those two things together, but I
just did 30 seconds ago.
It is interesting. I mean, I think maybe that was one of the things, maybe even on an unconscious level, that was very dear to me about Andy. And I think dear to a lot of people, not just me for sure, was just the courage and the tenacity that he represented, just in even being bold enough to say, I'm going to be a farmer and I'm going to figure out how to do this from a wheelchair. And of course, he had an incredible ally and an incredible support system in Hilda and in others who rallied around him to offer a hand where it was needed. But yeah, I mean, he had incredible vision and stamina and fortitude. And, I do think my grandfather probably had to have all of those things as well. And maybe even more than my grandfather, I think about my grandmother, who took care of her. By the time my father was a teenager, my grandfather was an invalid and was being raised along with his 7 siblings by my grandmother, who made biscuits at the Baptist Church in Athens, Georgia.
And that again brings back that community. I mean, and the religious and there's so many different aspects of food and beverage. And I was talking about it this morning on a presentation. It's community, it's tradition, it's livelihood, it's there's so many other words that you can come up with. It's nourishment, and nourishment in so many different ways. So how, and thinking of that and in what you do, because you're part of the farm, you're part owner of the farm, but you've also had Peach Dish, which there was a stat that I found, which I thought was remarkable, that it was 160, where did it go? It's right here. You had served 270 farmers in the course of a year. 270 farmers, local food vendors, and artists in 2017, spending $1.6 million in the local community. And that's huge.
was definitely the biggest thing I ever did.
Right.
I'll put it that way,
Okay. Yeah. Well, and the reason I bring that up is because, my listeners, a lot of my listeners are in the hospitality industry, and Peach, just so you know, was a food delivery company that was really focused on working with local farmers, and delivering food directly to consumers, that wanted those home cooked meals or those delicious farm fresh meals. But and I remember you and I talking about how can we transfer this into the hospitality industry, into the meetings and events, and how can we get those local farmers into that community. And now with the cooperative, I know in the New York Times article I read, you're partnering with Emory, but it's small to medium-sized farmers that maybe can actually help the food system and the hospitality industry more than a lot of the big players are, especially coming out of COVID. I don't know if there was a question or a statement in that at all.
Yeah. Well, I think in some ways we can help each other, right? Like, I think caterers and event conference centers, hotels, and other institutions like Emory and other education centers, obviously they're serving a lot of food. They're purchasing a lot of food. Some of them, maybe not all of them, but some of them have the flexibility to bring in new vendors. So maybe sometimes even in creative ways. At first, you can start small and things grow, and I think having an awareness for, like, if there was one thing I could say to event planners from the perspective of a farm and a farm business, is having an awareness of the impact that your purchasing dollars make on the local economy, on the food economy, on the food system, is a great place to start. And it doesn't have to be huge. Like, we didn't start at Peach Dish by spending $1 million a year on local food directly from farmers. That was gradual. And that really came as an epiphany to me, honestly. The business was so hard on so many levels, and we were shipping food nationally. We were creating these meal kits. There were so many mountains to climb and obstacles to tackle that it was sort of, midway through it, that I was like, oh, my values are around local food and supporting farmers. And this business, for me to really feel passionate about it, has to align with my values. And so, we started reaching out to farmers, and we had to find creative ways even to get farmers to take us seriously and want to buy from us. We did a lot of forecasting where we would send an email every week to our roster of farms and say, this is what we're forecasting that we're going to need, not just for this week and next week, but for 6 weeks out. So, if you've got sweet potatoes coming out of the field, let us know, because we're going to be buying them for the next 12 weeks or whatever it was. And I think that also spoke to needing to write those menus seasonally, to really understanding what was going on in the food system around us, to know, we don't want to put persimmons on the menu in April, because there aren't going to be local persimmons in April, or whatever the thing is, right? And it was a fantastic exercise for me to approach the farms from the buyer side and the purchaser side, and then to start to think about the impact, not just on the local food economy and the farms. And here's the flip side of it, that I know you're passionate about this and you want everyone to think about this, and I do too, is what you eat. Carlo Petrini, the founder of Slow Food, said it best. What you eat literally becomes who you are. It literally becomes your eyes and your ears and your brain, and everything that you do, to some extent, is due to the food that you've eaten, right? So your event planners, your caterers, your conference centers, your hotels also have this incredible opportunity, and I would argue responsibility, to serve people food that's going to make them better people.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I like that a lot. Yeah, I used to say And I used to use that quote from Carlo Petrini. It's like, you don't go into the store and your Star Wars toy that you buy is not going to become you, but the food that you buy from that store is going to become you,
Yeah.
and it's really true. And thinking about how you can, foster that. All right. So jumping, through COVID now, and we've got a lot of food distributors not having food, right, to be able to deliver to farmer or to hotels and catering companies. So is there a way, and, there's been a lot of movement to get some of the food from the farms directly to food banks and to pantries and things like that. How can all the farmers at the industrial level to the mid-size to the small help feed our food system or strengthen it? Because it seems like it's hurting right now.
Yeah. I mean, I think many people have a new awareness of the challenges of a global supply chain that I think many of us thought was infallible. Like it was never going to go down. And we've seen, and we're seeing many places where that's actually not true. We're having some challenges moving things around globally, getting them off of ships, getting them into trucks, and I don't know that I don't have solutions to offer to fix global logistics. I do have solutions to offer. And I think one of the opportunities that came from this challenge of COVID was for people to really see and have their eyes open to like, this is part of why it's important that we have food grown close to us, because something might happen that makes it difficult to move food from across our country, which is huge, across the world, whatever the case may be. I also think smaller businesses, mid-sized businesses, like most of the farms that I am affiliated with and most of the businesses I've ever run, have opportunities to be more flexible, be more innovative, to make change more quickly. And I think this is an opportunity for us to all see the advantage of that too. So, I mean, where there are opportunities maybe to explore a vendor relationship, either a direct vendor relationship or a new, smaller, mid-sized distributor that maybe you wouldn't have thought of before because maybe it seemed inconvenient to do the paperwork or whatever it was. I mean, I think this is the moment, like,
right.
Try that. And I want to give a shout out to, there's a distributor that's in the Atlanta area, but there's also, they're in Philly and they're in Texas and they're in Chicago. And I think they're slowly moving into a more national model, but they're called Common Market here in Atlanta. They're called Common Market Southeast. And their whole business is about working directly with smaller and mid-sized farmers and doing that institutional delivery. So they have been an incredible resource for farms like ours in terms of purchasing stuff from us. And they also, I think, are probably an incredible resource for food purchasers who, maybe are encountering challenges with larger distributors.
Yeah, I've been chatting with some chefs and they're like, yeah, you're only going to get 60% of your order this week because we're out of it. But a small little tangent of that story of changing your mindset is last week I was in Dallas and I was at a high-end hotel and the chef said one of his great employees right now that he would never have hired pre-COVID is a guy whose only cooking experience was at a Waffle House. And he said he comes to work on time. He leaves on time. He brings great ideas. He's so full of ideas to like change dishes up and think differently. And he's like, I would have said, because it's a 4 or 5 star hotel. And he's like, I probably would never have done it because he didn't have that experience in that venue before. He only had it at Waffle House. But he's like, I took a chance on him and it's paying off. And I think that's the same thing we can think about with our farmers and local providers.
Yeah. And the relationship, I believe the more direct the relationship, the stronger it is. I love that story. It makes me, there's so much to that story about thinking outside the box for sure, taking risks, offering opportunities, and how meaningful that can be. I understand that someone who had been a line cook at Waffle House doesn't have 4-star restaurant experience, but you know what they do have? They have incredible focus.
Yes.
They are incredible multitaskers. They're probably brilliant. And then what an interesting opportunity to let them use their brain in a different way. You know, right? It's, they're hard workers. Like there's no doubt about that.
I mean, smothered and covered in every other way you can get. I mean, he's got that.
All those orders coming at you, keeping them in your head while you're cooking. And when I hired one of our directors of operations at Peach Dish, he had been a chef de cuisine at a 5-star and beyond restaurant group. And I knew him because I knew him through the food world. So I knew he was reliable. I knew he was a hard worker. I knew he was a great guy. I also knew that working in a warehouse was something completely different for him. But my rationale was, if you can figure out how to serve dinner to 250 people on a Ferris wheel at this major event and keep those standards, like you can figure out the logistics and everything we need to do to run this warehouse and make these meal kits go out the door. And it was great. He did a great job. And it was fun for him too, because it was something totally different.
And I love that. It really adds a different level of experience, but also culture to it, because food is culture, and you bring that 5-star experience to what you're doing there and things like that. And so let's jump back to like farmers market and Wholesome Wave and community farmers markets, because that one of the things that I love about Wholesome Wave, which I know was a national organization that you and Katie and Jonathan helped bring to Atlanta. But one quote that I liked from you in that interview with Jennifer was that people were like, you need to lower the prices of your food. And, as a farmer, you need to lower the prices of your food so everybody can access it. And you're like, well, no, let's provide opportunity for them to access it in a variety of ways.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's a real conundrum. It goes back to that question that I was trying to get to when we were talking about feeding people as an opportunity to make their lives better because food becomes who they are. It's about values. It's about what you see as important to some extent. And I think culturally, we have been taught and have become to accommodate this idea that food shouldn't be expensive. Food shouldn't be expensive. And I am not saying that everyone can afford expensive food or should have to. But what I am saying is that we live in a society, in an economic system that has put the squeeze to farmers for a long time to cheapen their food, in terms of what they can sell it for. And it's challenging to make a living as a farmer. I mean, I don't know many farmers who I don't know any farmers who do it for the money. And I don't know many farmers who make a wage that most people would be satisfied with, especially when you do the math on what the hourly is, right. It's just a lot of work, and people do it for other reasons. They do it because they love being outside. They get meaning from interacting with the natural world. They get satisfaction from the challenges. It's an incredibly challenging job, and you have to know how to do so many things. And so it's a satisfying job, but it's not a job that pays a lot. And there just wasn't room, when people were like, you're charging too much for your food. It was like, I don't know what to say. Like, we have to be able to pay our bills. And so, this national organization called Wholesome Wave was doing some really cool stuff around incentives for SNAP recipients. Some people know that program as food stamps. SNAP recipients to purchase fruits and vegetables and proteins directly from farmers. And I loved the idea. I was smitten with the idea. And luckily, I mean, people who were smarter than me and more capable than me, like Jonathan Tesher and Kate Barney, were able to, rally around it. And we pulled together this Wholesome Wave Georgia organization. And started doubling SNAP at farmers markets. We started with 3. You've probably heard me say this before. We were terrified. We had $10,000 and we were terrified that we were going to run out of money. And now it's an organization that is in 100 or more farmers markets around the state. It's doing incredible work. There are at least 4 full-time employees. And the executive director now, Will Sellers, is an incredible guy, a real visionary, and is doing wonderful things. I think it's a great program. It's a great program for eaters. It's a great program for communities. It's a great program for farmers. And the other piece about farmers markets that was important and still is it's a community space. Mm-hmm. And it was very important to me that everyone feel invited to that community, that it not feel like an exclusive place where only certain people could shop or certain people could be.
Well, and it's when I went to Atlanta a couple of weeks ago and saw you, and we visited one farmer's market, but the day before I was at Freedom. I'm like, I got to go see all my friends, all my farmer friends and my chef friends who were there, and spent, a good hour and a half just hanging out at the farmer's market, just seeing that community of people who love to just eat good food. And not all of it was some farmers markets require certified organic or all natural foods, but, so food has brought me together to all of those people.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's, and that's another thread in that, that sort of fortifying tapestry of what a good thriving local food system does for a community. I mean, there's the economy aspect. I don't know what the latest research is. The last time I looked, it was I think it's something like 75 cents of every dollar spent at a local farmer's market stays in that community and stays for longer in that community. So you're fortifying your economy, you're fortifying your relationships. COVID is a great example of time where we hit a crisis and we needed that fortification. We needed to be there for each other in different ways. And I know for many people, myself included, during lockdowns or times of extreme inactivity, the fact that I could at least go to a farmer's market and make eye contact with someone who I knew and who I loved, it was like, okay, we're going to be okay. It's different, but we're going to be okay.
Well, and the fact that the number of CSA boxes, community supported agriculture boxes, grew 400% across the country. Yeah. And Will Harris was ready to pull out the front chair, the passenger seat of the van to put more boxes in there to deliver to local consumers. I mean, that just shows how much it did bring, and we needed that.
And I hope that's change that stays. I want to say that. I think that's probably the challenge that's ahead of us all now. It's how do we all keep our enthusiasm for that local food economy?
Right. And working really, really hard for it. So I want to come back to slow food, but I want to come back to the cooperative, Love is Love Cooperative Farm, because I was looking on and I'm going to put the link in the chat here, because you are looking for investors of it. But the grid that you put on there that talked about what it costs to run a farm is land is almost half the cost, and then the leasing, and then the well and the irrigation, the tractor and implements, the barns, the hoop house, the equipment, the labor, that the labor is the third smallest, right? But we don't think about, and you and I talked about it on that thing, is you were going to buy this tractor or something this piece of equipment that you needed to farm the land. And that costs money for you to give it to us in the farmer's market, to do it.
Oh, absolutely. it is not inexpensive. It's
Right.
not inexpensive really to set up any business. And a farm is a small business. Sometimes I think people don't really they think the farms are in some other kind of category, that there's nostalgia woven around it. And I think maybe because we're outside, people don't really think of it as work, but it's a small business like any other business. And it takes a tremendous amount of capital to stand up a farm. And I am so grateful to the community. And this goes back to that, like stitching that thread of relationship through our business and through what we've done for the last 13 years has really, we didn't see it at the time as an investment in anything other than creating stronger community. But as we're raising this capital for this new farm, we're finding that people want to support it, and they want to support it because they believe in it. They believe it's important. They believe in our work. I like to think they like the fact that the work is bigger than us. Like we've got, we're expanding. There's young farmers. Joe and I are the elders. We're going to age out of this thing. And these farmers are going to keep it going when we're in our rocking chairs or wherever we are.
I'm sure you're going to be on your rocking chair right there. Okay. So actually it reminds me to take you back to, you're doing this as cooperative. You and Joe are landless farmers.
We were.
You were. Now you have land. So, yeah. But there's a lot of landless farmers out there.
Yes.
So can you explain that to the listeners?
Sure. So when we started our farm business, we were offered an opportunity to lease a family farm, not far from Metro Atlanta. We did that for a couple of years. There was another farm inside of the city of Atlanta that was really close to our house that was available. That farm in particular, I want to talk about a little bit because it's so visionary, and I wish there was one. That farm's called Gaia Gardens. We've leased it for the last 11 years. I wish there was a farm like this in every county in America, really. Like it's an incubator is what I've come to realize about Gaia Gardens. It was started 25 years ago by a community of people who wanted to have a farm basically in their backyard. So they built a development together, a co-housing community called Eastlake Co-housing. And they basically took collectively what would have been their backyards. They collectively put it together and they created this 5-acre farm.
Wow.
That farm is leased to a farmer. Joe has been the 5th, I think, in the last 25 years. He stayed the longest. It comes with its infrastructure, irrigation, barns, wash pack stations, walk-in coolers, tractors, other implements and equipment, a greenhouse. All of those things exist and they're a part of the lease agreement. It's a very favorable lease, and it allows someone who wants to farm to come in and establish a business, get it going, create their markets, figure out, do a lot of troubleshooting. And now, basically what we've done is we've used that as a springboard to owning our own land and creating this cooperative. And I hope that that's something that will be, it won't be done exactly like we did it, but I hope the next farmer will also be able to use Gaia as an incubator. And like I said, I wish there was a Gaia Gardens in every county in the country.
That would be amazing for sure. And with the organization that you're working with that helped you get the land in for Love is Love Cooperative, I know they're doing it in Chicago as well, right?
Yeah.
And hopefully doing it across the country.
Fund is what it's called. And they
What's
have
it called again?
The Conservation Fund.
Okay.
They have a fund they are an organization that does land conservation on many, many levels. We're the first farm to go through a new program called the Working Farms Fund. And the fund exists to help farmers who don't have land get access to farmland that's affordable. And it puts that farmland under conservation, so it's protected from development in perpetuity.
Wow. That's awesome. So like you as the elders, it's like you're just going to keep getting farmers to come in and farm that land. That's fantastic. And I said it a few minutes ago, and I don't know if this is that same kind of culture anywhere else in the world, but Slow Food is another organization that you and I are connected with. And and I remember going to Ron's restaurant, the restaurant across the dog.
I'm putting my bag to show you.
Oh, yay! Okay,
right
yes.
here.
And we recognize Slow Food was started by Carlo Petrini back in 1985, right?
Ish.
Yep. When the first McDonald's went into Rome, and they wanted to fight fast food with slow food and get people interested in knowing where their food comes from and knowing that farmers. So you went to international level of that, right? Yep.
Well, I went to Terra Madre twice, if that's, yes. And that organization has been so influential for me in my life, in my work, inspirational, challenging. I think one of the things I love about Slow Food is it causes me to ask a lot of questions around value, around what I want, around what I think my food culture is. And I think, that's part of when Petrini protested the McDonald's with the Italian grandmothers and their bowls of homemade pasta, I think, part of what he was asking all Romans, all Italians, was what is our food culture and do we value it? Is that an important part of who we are? And I think that's a question that we all can ask ourselves. It's like, what are your food memories? Those point to your food culture. Are you still connected to that? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, there was something you said in one of the interviews that food is part of your personal and family narrative. And, Joe talked about growing up in Okinawa, which he and I need to talk about later on because I did too. But, and, living abroad or living in different parts of the US or different parts of the world, you learn different things about that food and that culture and how, and even when we talk about refugees now and coming back and they're introducing their food to our communities, and how does that change the culture and the narrative of our beings?
Well, I think that's one of the beautiful things about the United States is it is the melting pot. There are so many cultures, there's so many histories, there's so many things to explore. I'm really grateful for that. I love that I live in a city where I can get almost any kind of cuisine.
Yeah, Atlanta, I do miss that I miss that from Atlanta, from compared to where I am now. So trying to get into that local food community here in Eastern North Carolina. So bringing that in. I
have to say, like my food culture is collard greens and banana pudding and biscuits, and that's an important piece of it too. I don't want to live somewhere where I can't get those things.
Oh, totally, for sure. And and I was first introduced to collard greens and when I lived in Atlanta, and I love them. They're so good. But when I lived in Japan, I did not eat sushi. I no, but now I will. But it's really interesting how those different things play into us. So I know you're at a conference and we're reaching 45 minutes here, but there's so much we can talk about food and culture but what's your favorite food and beverage? Now that you just mentioned biscuits and collards. Yeah.
I mean, I like to explore. I really do. And I would say I have two sort of go-tos for comfort food. And one of them is traditional Southern food. My dad was a big barbecue guy. So barbecue will always be a part of I don't know, the familiar territory of foods that I love. But I also really love Middle Eastern food, Israeli food, Lebanese food. And I think that probably comes in a close second in terms of just if I need a satisfying meal and I know it's going to be satisfying. But one of my favorite memories from Terra Madre was coming back on the bus to the little village where we were staying. We did these food exchanges on the bus that sort of became a kind of communion. And one day I had a delicious mead from Poland, and smoked caterpillars from Burkina Faso.
Caterpillars?
I'm not telling you that I craved those smoked caterpillars, but they weren't bad. They weren't bad at all. And I loved the exploration of it all,
That's so interesting. And actually, it reminds me, I get an email about once a quarter from one of the guys from Africa. He checks in with me. Hey, how are you doing? And I met him in Slow Food, Terra Madre. And so just for everybody to know, it's the biannual festival of food, basically, that Slow Food puts on with education and food from around the world. And to me, I think Slow Food is a lot more prevalent in other countries than it is here in the States, because we've got such a broad spectrum of it. But it really is amazing what you learn about how to cook and where the food comes from and all the other cultures of food around the world.
Absolutely. And I want to just add this one last thing about Terra Madre and about Slow Food. It also, if you'll remember, started, I believe it was Vandana Shiva, Dr. Vandana Shiva from India, who challenged Slow Food International to bring the peasants of the world together. She said that, the GA is bringing the elites and the rich and powerful of the world together, but we need to bring the peasants of the world together because people have the power.
That's awesome. That is awesome. So we're going to end on that because there's no better way to do that. So how can everybody get a hold of you? And support you?
Yeah, our website is loveislovefarm.com. Loveislovefarm.com. We're on social media channels, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter as Love is Love Farm. You can get to my email address from our website, but it's judith@loveislovefarm.com. So, I'm always happy to share resources, to explore, would love to talk to anybody who might be interested in supporting our farm. Either as a buyer or as a shareholder or as a volunteer or a working member. Like there's lots of ways to be a part of the good food community.
All right. Well, thank you. I will put all of those links in there and the link to the support page. I found that as well to support you. You're welcome.
Lucy, I love talking to you. It's good to see you. You look so beautiful.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that. So Judith, and again, I love talking to you, and there's so many different avenues that we can talk about this. And we also need to talk about your mom being a caterer, but that's a whole nother thing to talk about as well. So thank you for taking time while you're at a conference to talk to me, and we will chat soon.
Yes. Thanks for having me. Bye.
You're welcome. Bye. And everybody, thanks for tuning in. This is the Eating at a Meeting podcast. We were talking to Judith Winfrey of Love is Love Farm. And until next time, stay safe and eat well. Thanks for listening to the Eating at a Meeting podcast, where every meal matters. I'm Tracy Stuckrath, your food and beverage inclusion expert. Call me and let's get started right now on creating safe and inclusive food and beverage experiences for your customers, your employees, and your communities. Share the podcast with your friends and colleagues at our Eating at a Meeting Facebook page and on all podcast platforms. To learn more about me and receive valuable information, go to tracystuckrath.com. And if you'd like more information on how to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line, then visit eatingatameeting.com.